Como um criminal se tornou no Drift King, no rei do Drift. Bora lá.
Looking around YouTube today,
vou val.
you'd think that the practice of drifting is as old as racing cars itself. But the sport of delicate balance and complete anarchy,
Tá-se bem.
of smoke, shredded tires, and dented fenders hasn't always been around. It's relatively new, in fact.
Yeah, por acaso.
Drifting is dancing with horsepower,
Yeah.
battling with fenders, and singing with exhaust notes and tire smoke. It's driving, but a little bit over dramatic. You know, sort of like this channel.
Cada estilo.
Despite the art of oversteer invading everything from Pixar to
Eu vou dizer mesmo aqui. Eu prefiro drift do que a própria corrida.
PlayStation, its roots are humble and centered around one man. A man who rose from rebellious teenager street racing in the quiet hours of Japan's winding toge
Este é o
to a
homem.
world-class driver standing atop podiums around the world. Someone who changed the world by turning his wheels in the other
Ele tem
direction,
canal no YouTube.
took risks others weren't willing to take,
É muito fixe, ele faz tipo
and
reviews
left a
de
legacy that
carros.
will last for generations
nice.
to come. This is the story of Keiichi Tsuchiya, the Drift King.
Oh yes! A lenda! É ele! O homem! O verdadeiro!
The story of
KD.
Keiichi Tsuchiya begins in
No,
1956 in the small village of Tomi. There, Tsuchiya-sama was born. Rumors have it that he came out of the womb sideways. The town of Tomi was long known for its hot springs, its beautiful landscapes, but most importantly, its proximity to winding roads known as toge. In the late 1960s, you might find Datsun 510s and Honda S600s
Datsun.
attacking the nearby curves of Usui Pass late at night, a 7.5-mile narrow mountain road over bridges, hairpins, and sheer cliff edges. Late at night, populated by drivers
Eu acho que
clamoring.
hoje em dia, eu acho que esta estrada da montanha Toge, a partir de uma certa hora, vocês não podem tipo andar por lá normalmente, porque a partir dali já é tipo aquilo já é tão cultural que a partir de uma certa hora aquilo já é tipo considerado uma pista de corrida, basicamente. É uma cena tipo brutal
to be the
daquilo que eu vi.
fastest on its many winding passes. Their name was
Durante o
Hashiriya,
dia
motoring
é
enthusiasts
caminho
that
normal,
emerged in the 60s and
mas a
70s of
partir de
Japan,
uma certa hora
taking their love of driving to the streets,
tem que se ter
hills,
cuidado.
and raceways of Japan's diverse blacktops. Young Keiichi would sit awake at night, listening to the roar of engines echoing through the hills as they battled at night. So inspired was Keiichi that one day he kickstarted his gas-powered bicycle and rode it 120 miles to Fuji Speedway, just to
Yeah,
see
man.
racing up close and in person. On that day, Tsuchiya-sama would witness a driver pushing themselves and their car to the limit and be inspired to spend his lifetime doing the same.
Yeah.
There, at the helm of a Hakusuka GTR, Kunimitsu Takahashi was overtaking his opponents by sliding his car through the corners.
E ele ficou tipo, Mano, Phonics, como é que se chama o bacana do Initial D?
Como
é que ele se chama? Basicamente, esse gajo do Initial D é contar a história deste, é tipo inspirado nele. Não é a
Today,
história
Keiichi
mesmo dele.
Tsuchiya
Olha,
is well known for bringing the sport of sliding cars to the masses. But Kunimitsu Takahashi, otherwise known as Kuni-san, was truly the father of drifting. A man whose motorsports career is as impressive in its wins as it is in its diversity. Kuni-san
man.
started out as a motorcycle racer in the late 1950s,
Okay.
rising through the ranks to earn a spot on the Honda Speed Club factory team, where he rode his 250cc Honda over the finish line to become the first Japanese rider to win the West German Motorcycle Grand Prix in 1961. A year later, he would attempt the absurdly dangerous Isle of Man TT, a blisteringly fast motorcycle time trial run on public streets that has claimed the lives of over 150 riders.
Porra!
There.
A sério? Esta pista tipo, matou mais de 150 pilotos, mano. What the fuck?
Somewhere amongst the 219 turns around the town of Douglas,
E os gajos escorregavam aqui e saíam a voar.
Nissan loses control of his Honda 250, and the ensuing accident nearly takes his life. While recovering from his heavy injuries, Kunimitsu is forced to reconsider whether racing on two wheels is even worth it anymore.
Para mim faz-me grande confusão. Tipo, andar numa bicicleta na estrada, ainda por cima numa alta velocidade. Mano, não tens proteção nenhuma. Aí faz-me grande confusão.
Luckily, at the time, Nissan had learned of his dominating performance on motorcycles and offered him a spot on their factory team in 1965. And with that, the leather jacket of rider Kunimitsu was hung on the wall for the rest of time. As a driver for Nissan, he set many lap records in their prototype race cars, such as the R380, the R381, and the R382. But it would be his outings in the Hakusuka GTR that would not only earn him trophies, but the love of an entire nation of motoring fans. In the early 70s, Kunisan found himself in the cockpit of the Nissan Skyline 2000 GTR. With the spirit of competition burning in his heart, he came to win. But his tires were absolute garbage. And he wasn't alone. Everyone's rubber struggled to keep grip.
Então por isso que ele ia de lado. No way.
You see, tire technology in 1970 was way behind the power and dynamics of the racing cars they were fitted to. So you couldn't really rely on them to maintain grip as you attacked a turn, or stay in control as you accelerate out of an apex. What this meant was...
Naquela altura devia ser bué da lixado. Imaginem, é o que eles estão a dizer. Os carros, o próprio carro estava tão avançado que o tipo de borracha, a tecnologia da borracha não aguentava a potência do carro.
That most drivers would go very slow in and timidly accelerate out of a corner to maintain traction. Kunisan, whose bravery had been forged by years of two-wheeled death traps, had a different approach. Instead of meekly feathering the throttle and abiding by the limits of his tires, he would just press the accelerator firmly, aim at the corner exit, initiate a four-wheel slide, and just wait for his tires to give him the traction he needed to accelerate out. The result was essentially drifting. A sports car sliding through a turn, tires billowing smoke, and unexpected Japanese motoring fans screaming with acclaim. Kunisan's motoring exploits would go on for decades, but that might just be a story for another time. Because there in the 1970s, among the onlookers watching with eyes wide open and jaws agape, was a young Keiichi Tsuchiya, who would forever be inspired by Kunisan's outlandish driving style.
Eu conheço esta estrada tão bem. É a minha pista favorita no Car Drift X Online, o que é?
And who would quickly start saving for a car of his own, so that he too could slide his car through corners, not on a racetrack, but on the dangerous mountain passes of Japan.
Aí é bem. Oh Pedro, era o que eu estava a dizer. A live só caiu para ti. Eu tenho aqui a live também aberta e está normal. E o ABS também não disse nada. Por isso é para ti. Skylinezinho. Skyline.
Following the absolutely massive success of the Hakusuka GTR, Nissan released its KPGC 110 GTR, aka the Kenmeri. It is one of the greatest and rarest cars Japan has ever created. And somehow, according to Tsuchiya, it was his first car. Look, I know everyone everywhere quotes Tsuchiya-sama as starting from some humble beginnings, but driving one of the 197 Kenmeri GTRs as his first car triggers the sus in me a little bit. Other accounts say that his first car was a Nissan Sunny B110. Either way, whatever car Tsuchiya did start in, he didn't
Sunny One Piece
dive headfirst into racing. In fact, at first, he refused to compete with others. After seeing how treacherous and tight the Yusui Pass was, he opted instead to drive out to remote farmland and practice his driving technique on the weekends for 4 whole years. 4 years of constant practice.
Porra, no way.
Braking, heel towing, and counter steering until he had a connection with the car that was absolute.
Nah.
After spending what is honestly an absurd amount of time practicing, Tsuchiya finally felt it was time to take on the Yusui Hashiriya. Keiichi made short work of the mountain racers. They never really stood a chance. When he practiced...
Pois, porque se ele ao estar à frente e fazer drift, não há espaço para ultrapassar também. E ele ao estar fazer a entrada de lado, por isso que eu em jogos de carros, para mim o drift é muito importante. Tem que ter um bom drift. Porque eu também sou assim. Eu corro mais rápido ao usar o drift. É tipo no Forza e isso. Epá, não me é natural de ir assim, parar. Mano, eu vou aqui, entro no Apex, dou um toquezinho de lado e entro assim, e vou lá.
For 4 years at something, forging your skills with fervent dedication, little can stand in your way. Keiichi was quickly deemed king of the mountain, and rivals would travel from all over the region to challenge him, only to see his taillights disappearing around the corner ahead of them, never to see them again.
Ainda por cima o gajo com um carro bué da levezinho. Tem poucos cavalos e tal. Brincava com aquilo.
Adored by other Hashiriya for his flamboyant racing style, passing his opponents in curves while sliding sideways. Word of Tsuchiya-sama's abilities soon traveled down the mountains to the world of professional Japanese racing. And in 1977, Keiichi would begin his life's work as a professional racing driver. But the soul of illegal mountain racing would never leave him.
As you already know, this is the man responsible for bringing the drift sensation from the other side of the Pacific to our shores here in the United States. He's a D1 Grand Prix judge, the Drift King himself, Keiichi Tsuchiya.
Tsuchiya knew the road ahead of him was long.
De tudo. O homem ia falar tipo, este gajo é um gajo espetacular, trouxe o drift para os Estados Unidos e ele.
Long and difficult, just like his successes as an outlaw.
Eu vi este desafio. Meteram fita cola numa das mãos dele.
Mountain racer. His career as a pro driver would take a lot of time and dedicated practice. His humble racing debut began in the Fuji Freshman Racing Series, which is sort of a college sports version of touring car racing. You get to act like the professionals, but you're going to pay for everything yourself. There he would pilot Toyota Starlets and Nissan Sunnies, economical, fun little cars with less than 100 horsepower. Keiichi's dedication to mastering driving skill and not relying on horsepower meant that he quickly racked up wins and garnered the support of sponsors. And even though he was winning, he felt like he was being held back by these low horsepower rookie racing classes. So he went to his sponsors and asked for money to buy a new, faster car. They said, sure, win the entire championship and we'll give you a new car. So he did. And in 1984, he stepped out of the world of underpowered, unassuming racing cars and into the driver's seat of an all-new, underpowered, unassuming racing car. But this would be a seat he would never leave for the rest of his life.
Ficou mesmo o carro. É mesmo o carro dele, não esquece.
The 1985 Toyota Corolla GTS. A Toyota dependable. A Corolla.
Mas este é o trem. Tem que ser? Ou não? Eu não sei qual é a diferença. Se Citroën ou não. Mas eu acho que o Citroën é a versão dos pop lights, né? Dos pop-ups. E a grande salve.
The 1980s were, well, for lack of a better term, weird.
Weird, yeah.
And the world of 80s Japanese cars was no different. Car companies of the time were abandoning complex rear-wheel drive platforms for simpler, more fuel-efficient front-wheel drive cars. Mitsubishi Mirage, Honda Civics, Toyota Tercels, all a dismal sign of the slow and depressing death of the sports car. But there among them was one last freedom fighter, a sports car for the masses. Well, before the Miata came along. The AE86 Corolla. For this generation,
Eu curti bué de ter um. Mas é pá, sendo muito velho. Porque este carro já tem para aí uns 40 anos. Na boa. É pá, vem muito problema, meu. Muito problema.
Toyota went insane.
Eu sei que há uma comunidade forte cá em Portugal de AE86. Eu sei disso. Mas é muito complicado, meu.
Up in half. One was just another front-wheel drive economy car, but parked next to it at a dealership would be a near mirror image. But this time, with a rear-wheel drive platform, sportier suspension, and a free-revving, fun-loving 1.6-liter engine, the Hachi Roku. A plucky economy car with the heart of a champion. For our hero Keiichi, it was love at first sight. His racing prowess was forged on tight mountain roads. Tsuchiya-sama never cared for high horsepower, turbos, or gimmicks. To win, he believed you needed a vehicle you could trust. One that did what it was told and communicated back to the driver with solid inputs and delicate handling. Tsuchiya's competition AE86 went by many names. Carrot Flashpoint, Karada, whatever you called it, you saw it cross the finish line first. Though underpowered and unassuming, Keiichi and his Carrot A86 dominated the Fuji Freshman Series for 6 championships, leaving more powerful and advanced cars in its dust. So, what do you do when you're dominating more powerful?
Pronto, estão a ver, é tipo este estilo de entrada que eu faço no jogo.
So, what do you do when you're dominating the competition and no one can beat you? You have a little fun with it.
Eurobeat.
Like his hero
pois é, pessoal.
Keiichi kept
o novo sucessor. É sucessor? Acho que é. Do Initial D está quase a ser.
Himself entertained on course by sliding through corners, passing his opponents while graciously countersteering. It was probably really fun to watch, but must have driven the other competitors nuts.
Eu adorei aquele anime.
Tsuchiya-sama's performance in the Advent 86 was so dominant, the Nismo team had him investigated for cheating. I mean, how else can you explain that this puny little hatchback was sliding around corners and still passing its competitors? He, of course, wasn't cheating, he was just kind of a jerk. But the fans loved it. Tsuchiya was winning so easily that he found it boring.
Mano, isto são os saltos mesmo antigos, mano. Já ninguém festeja assim. Ninguém festeja assim.
So his antics got bigger.
Vocês veem todo o tipo de festejo antigo, mano. Futebol, basquetebol, é tudo assim. Ainda não desenvolveram tipo a personalidade, estão a ver? É assim, parece tipo os jogos, mano.
Exaggerating his drifting, pushing the track limits, driving fans wild and pissing off the officials. Eventually, the officials had enough of it and threatened to suspend his license. His on-track exploits led him to earn the title of Dorikin, or Drift King. The reputation and controversy around the Drift King inspired Option Magazine to reach out to Tsuchiya. They thought, what if we were able to show everyone the wild driving style of the Drift King? So they set about following Tsuchiya-sama for weeks,
foi por isso.
riding along with him and filming him attacking Yusui Pass in his personal AE86. What they released is a time capsule. Roughly 20 minutes of oddly edited but superbly shot drifting masterclass. Raw sound, pure driving, and few cuts. It was called Plusby, and it may seem almost timid now, but when it was created, nothing like it had ever been released. The reason nothing like it had ever been released was, well, in Japanese culture, filming yourself committing crimes is not as popular as it is here in America.
Eu vi isto, mano.
As Plusby started making waves in the automotive scene, authorities took notice and immediately demanded the VHS tapes be removed from store shelves. Now, of course, censorship rarely works. The controversy just made Plusby even more desirable, its content more taboo and thus exciting to watch. And with that, drifting had hit the main stage. In 1986, Carboy magazine held what is believed to be the first drifting competition. And hot off the viral hit of Plusby, Keiichi and Daijiro of Option magazine started their own drifting events in 1989. They were known as Ikaten. Keiichi and Daijiro never took anything seriously. The Ikaten were meetups of poor car enthusiasts let loose on racing tracks of Japan throughout the 90s. They had no real judging or points, and accomplishments earned drivers the title of various sea creatures. With ranks like jellyfish and squid, the series got sillier as time went on, eventually even inspiring Keiichi to adopt a cute octopus as his mascot for his parts company, K-Office. Keiichi would go on to become the judge of nearly every important drifting competition in Japan, including D1 GP when it launched in the year 2000. Tsuchiya-sama would host best motoring vids, appear all over in popular culture, he created the Drift Bible, and was the supervisor and...
What? Há uma bíblia de drift, mano, no way. Finalmente uma bíblia que eu posso... que me posso identificar, mano.
Allegedly inspiration for the anime Initial D. Keiichi himself had essentially kick-started the drifting revolution in Japan and...
Como é que vocês sabem? Espera aí, eu acho que...
Keiichi himself had
É um
essentially...
GTR. É mesmo GTR. Então isto deve ser Power Slide, mano, porque é muito complicado fazer drift com...
actually kick-started the drifting revolution in Japan and subsequently the world. But if you asked him, he never meant to. He just drifted because it was faster and because it was more fun. So while he rose to fame as the counter-steering Doriken, his heart always beat for the spirit of real competition, door-to-door racing, and it would be a heartbeat heard round the world.
When I was racing, everybody knew that I would win. So to stop people being bored and fed up with the same old thing, I started drifting the car through the corners, much more than the other drivers, to keep people interested, and it improved the popularity of the sport.
Even as Keiichi became a television popularity, a judge for a new form of automotive competition, Tsuchiya never left the driver's seat. He continued to compete and win throughout the 80s until it culminated with what must be a cornerstone moment for Tsuchiya-sama's life. He was invited to be
eu a seguir deste vídeo vou ver se encontro o canal dele.
Takashi's co-pilot in his Group A Skyline GTR. Yes, the man who had inspired Keiichi so many years before to oversteer his way to the top was now going to be sharing his cockpit. Tsuchiya would commit himself fully to taking that team to the podium, eventually earning the duo a third-place podium in Group A. The successes of the Kunimitsu racing team caught the attention of Honda, who were fielding their new NSX GT2 in Le Mans. The GT2 was a monster. It was an NSX-R that had been completely un-Honda'd. 400 horsepower, wide-bodied in carbon fiber and aluminum, and revised and revamped from head to toe. In that year's Le Mans, Team Kunimitsu would start from the pit lane, but 24 hours later, 2 laps ahead of the Callaway Corvettes, Tsuchiya and Kunimitsu would take home a class win. After that, there were wins in Porsche 911s, failures in Dodge Vipers, hell, Tsuchiya even drove a few NASCAR events. His notoriety garnered the attention of team owners. They wanted Tsuchiya-san in their cars. And it would all culminate in what Tsuchiya himself calls his greatest achievement. In 1999, a team of 3 Toyota GT1s would enter Le Mans.
Aí, pessoal, vocês não estão a perceber.
In 1999,
este Mercedes aqui é ícone, mano. Este Mercedes é muito bom. É incrível este Mercedes.
A team of 3 Toyota GT1s would enter Le Mans. Alongside Tsuchiya was Toshio Suzuki and Ukio Katayama. Their pace from the outset was conservative. This was an endurance race after all, and the strategy worked. As laps went on, their faster competitors dropped out of the race. One even decided to fly out of the race. Then, near the end of the 24 hours, the Toyota GT1 was battling Team BMW for the top spot. Unfortunately, in those final hours, the GT1 suffered a tire puncture and would only take home second place. But second place in the world's most difficult and prestigious race is not a bad high watermark. In the following years,
Tsuchiya would problema na roda.
Continue to race Supras and NSXs in the All Japan GT Championship. And then, after decades spent sliding through corner after corner, Tsuchiya-sama would hang up his jade green racing suit for good in 2003.
Até hoje ele está com esta cena do verde.
A legacy of smiles, oversteer, and checkered flags behind him. Today, Keiichi Tsuchiya's life might be a bit slower paced than the days of Le Mans victories and Ikaten tire shredding, but his heart beats just the same. From the moment he looked over that fence at Fuji Speedway to see Kuni-san driving with flair, to standing atop a podium in a country thousands of miles away, Tsuchiya-sama has never lost his spirit. Hell, parked in his garage is his own personal AE86, a masterpiece of underdog engineering, and a shining reminder of what Keiichi himself means to the world. A quiet, humble, smiling champion. Never quite so serious in character, but always a fervent and dedicated competitor. If you were lucky enough to meet Keiichi in person, you'd forget that he had led such a storied life, one of championships and being an icon for an entire motorsports movement. Tsuchiya's story is that of a foundation of an entire sport, an inspiration of a generation, and the competitive spirit of an entire nation. If you asked him, he would tell you that he's just another Japanese racing driver. But to those that have felt his influence throughout time, myself included, he is truly so much more than that. He is the Drift King.
Porra, meu, este gajo. Mano. Com caraça. Deixa ver se. Ok, está aqui. Eu acho que. Deixa lá ver. Eu acho. Não é. O canal dele não é assim. Onde é que está? É este. É o Car Prime. Mas só que este é o canal em inglês. Este é o canal dele. Olha aqui. O i86 dele. Oh, olha aqui o homem. Deixa eu ver onde é que está tipo, os mais populares. Possivelmente. Olha, está aqui o carro dele. Aqui está o homem. Isto é muito fixe, meu. Olha, eu gosto muito deste canal. Este canal por acaso é muito fixe. Recomendo. Tens aí uma batalha de drift. Mano. Muito fixe. Oh, o que é que eu disse? Ele está sempre com o fatinho dele. Verdinho. Está sempre. Mano, é o Drift King, né?